Can you guys hear that bird? It's so loud. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Anna, for those who are new here, and this is What a Ghoul Wants, where we talk about pretty much everything horror. And today I'm going to be going through my March Letterboxd recap. Well, it is March and then a little bit of February because I did not do a February wrap-up video. I didn't do one because I did a 14 days of heartbreak horror watch list video where I talk about 14 Valentine's Day related movies that I was going to watch for February. I kind of talk about the movies in that video, so I didn't really feel like going over them again. There were definitely ones that I watched for the first time, and so in that video, I just kind of talk about the premise and not about how I felt about the movies. But if you want to see how I felt about the ones that I have not seen before, you can head on over to my Letterboxd, and I've rated and reviewed all of those. I didn't rate and review the ones that I had already seen, but all that to say, I will just be talking about a couple of movies that I watched in February, but I'm going to start with those and then head on into my March watches, and I watched a lot of movies that I really loved in March, so I'm very excited to talk about a lot of those. So let's go ahead and get started with the ones that I watched in February that I want to talk about, and the first one of those is Happy Birthday to Me, and I did give this movie 3 stars and a heart. I watched this movie for my birthday, actually. I actually did a full reaction video to this, and so you can see me watching the movie in real time and reacting to it. If you want to head on over there and see how I felt about it in the moment, go ahead and watch that. Yeah, it was a really fun watch. I enjoyed it. It was pretty goofy. There were definitely some parts where I was like, yeah, this is pretty much on par for an 80s slasher with a low budget. So all that to say, overall, I really did enjoy it, which is why I gave it a heart. And I will probably be watching it every year for my birthday, or maybe alternating that with like Bloody Birthday or something. So the next movie that I watched in February that was not on the heartbreak horror list was Cry Wolf from 2005. Now, I don't think I ever saw this around when it came out. I think I have false memories of maybe seeing parts of it, but as I was watching it, I was like, I actually don't know that I've ever seen this. Maybe I've just seen like the trailer or something, but it's very interesting. I do like the premise, the idea of creating a fake serial killer as a prank, basically. And the design of the killer I really liked as well. The camo jacket with that orange ski mask and the knife, I thought that that was really effective. And I think they could have gone a little farther with it. I can't remember if it was a PG-13 movie or not, but I remember it being relatively mild. Again, this was in February, so I'm kind of having trouble remembering. But yeah, I think that the idea was cool. The execution was a little bit confusing. The way that the movie is edited, I think they're trying to make it seem like you don't know who the killer is and confuse you in that way. But in general, it kind of made the whole story confusing, if that makes sense. So if you can set that aside and go on this kind of crazy ride that the movie is trying to take you on, I think that it's enjoyable. This probably isn't one that I'm going to rewatch a ton, but as far as like early 2000s teen slashers go, I had a fun time with it. It's so fun to watch Bon Jovi in a movie. I didn't know it was him until like the end credits rolled, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess that was him. I guess out of context, I just don't know what he looks like. He has to be holding a guitar and singing into a microphone for me to know who he is. I don't know. So I thought that that was fun. I thought that our leads were pretty strong. The acting was pretty strong. The British guy, I just know him from New Girl, so it was really funny seeing like a younger version of him in a slasher movie. But yeah, if you're looking for just kind of something that you can watch, turn your brain off, and just kind of get some early 2000s slasher vibes, I would suggest watching this movie. Next up is Whispering Corridors from 1998. This is a South Korean supernatural film. It is pretty low budget, but I was really charmed by this movie. The premise is pretty basic for a supernatural story. It's this girls' school that is being haunted by a former classmate. And it just kind of delves into the relationships between some of the girls in the school, and then them trying to figure out the mystery of what's going on with all of these supernatural haunting type things happening. I learned about this movie from a podcast that I listened to. I had never heard of it before. This podcast that I really enjoy, Colors of the Dark, which I believe is on the Fangoria podcast network, that is a really great podcast to listen to if you want to learn about underrated gems. They actually have a Patreon where they talk about deep cuts, where they go even farther into more obscure horror movies. But still on Colors of the Dark, they talk about a lot of movies that I've just never heard of before. So one of the hosts, Dr. Rebecca McKendry, talked about this film and then went into a little bit about the series, because there are other films after this that are related to the storyline. So I would be interested in watching those. But this one, it was just a tad long for me. I think it's like an hour 45. And I think they really could have cut out some time, at least 15 minutes, to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. So if you're okay with watching some low-key scenes where, you know, you can kind of see what's happening, it's not going to blow your mind with originality. It's a pretty standard ghost story, but it's got the all-girls school vibe with everybody in their uniforms, but you also have, on top of that, like the kind of grainy, low-budget 90s visuals of the camera work and everything. So I really liked that. And I was like, okay, I don't mind being patient with this movie because it's so charming. So yeah, that one was just a nice little surprise. So I gave it 3 stars and a heart. Next up, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2022. The reboot, requel, whatever you want to call it. I gave this movie 2.5 stars. I didn't hate it. I just want to preface my review with that fact. I did not hate this movie. The 2.5 stars just means that I thought it was kind of right in the middle as far as movies go. It didn't blow my mind. It wasn't like super impressive by any means. There were some really good kills. There was some good visuals and camera work, and the aesthetics were nice. But on the other hand, I think that the story was a bit wonky. There were some things that didn't quite make sense, even if you're doing kind of a shorter movie, because it was a pretty tight, let me see how long it was, 81 minutes. So, very lean movie, which I do appreciate. If it's just a slasher movie and they just want to get to the slicing and dicing, I don't mind that at all. And I know that slasher victims in movies aren't always supposed to be likable, so I wasn't really mad about the characters. I don't know. It was just something about it. I was like, yeah, this is fine. It's okay. Maybe on a rewatch, I will like it more. And again, I haven't seen all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, so there are things about it that I think it was maybe trying to reference that I just wasn't familiar with because I haven't seen the whole franchise. I did really think that the Sally character was completely unnecessary. I just would have rather her not be in the movie at all, or them really do a lot more with the character. It just kind of felt a little throwaway, and I'm not going to spoil anything for those who haven't seen it, but those are just my thoughts on the characters and the inclusion of Sally. So yeah, I mean, I will definitely watch this movie again. It was really nice to look at, and again, the kills were really good, but there were just some things that I thought didn't play out very well. So I don't necessarily think it deserves all of the hate that it gets, but there are definitely some people that really love the movie too. So it's really interesting how divided the horror community was on this movie in particular. But 2.5 stars for me. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. After that, I watched Cherry Falls. This is a movie that I got on Blu-ray, which I was very excited to finally get it. It's kind of a funny story because I had just been wanting to watch this movie for forever, and I couldn't find it streaming anywhere. It wasn't even available for rent, so I was like, okay, I'm going to ask for this for my birthday. Asked for it on Blu-ray so that I can finally watch it. And then, of course, a couple days before my birthday, it comes on Shudder. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just wait to watch the Blu-ray if I get it for my birthday. And I did. So it was kind of cool. I watched the special features and everything. But I had really built up this movie in my mind because I just had heard some really good things about it being one of the better post-Scream slashers of the early 2000s. And it really didn't disappoint for me. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. It's by no means perfect. There are definitely some things about it that some people might not like, but I could kind of set those things aside and see it for what it was. And I just really appreciate what it was doing with messaging around virginity and kind of flipping the script with slasher movies, how, usually your final girl is a virgin, but the whole thing about this killer is he's killing virgins. So if you are a virgin, you won't be the final girl. So I thought that was really interesting, and I love Brittany Murphy so much. She gave an incredible performance, and her outfits in this movie were so cool. She's kind of a little punkish. She's wearing black all the time. She was wearing this hat that I really liked, and I was like, I would really love to own a hat like that, like a replica of this hat, because it's so cute. But yeah, she's great. She did a fantastic job. The supporting cast was pretty good. I would say the killer reveal for me personally wasn't mind-blowing or anything, but it made sense within the context of the film. But this one is just kind of a weird early 2000s slasher. The premise sets it apart from other ones of that time, I think. I think that the whole commentary on sex and our whole perception of sex and taboos and what's right or wrong for young people to do, and how people are getting punished for what they're doing within the context of the movie. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. So yeah, I definitely would say if you haven't seen this, try to seek it out. I don't know if it's still on Shudder or not, but I would definitely say catch it while it's on streaming now, because if it goes away, I'm not sure when it will come back again. So definitely check out Cherry Falls if you haven't already. And the last movie that I watched in February that was not on the Heartbreak Horror list was The Deep House from 2021. And this is basically just like a haunted house story set underwater. It's a house that is under a lake, and there are two people that are going to explore. I think they're YouTubers, and they're trying to get views. Like, they go to kind of weird abandoned places, and so they heard about this house, and they were like, all right, we're gonna go check it out, bring our scuba gear, and record down under the water. Which is a really cool premise. The thing for me was it was basically just a very basic haunted house story with the element of being underwater, and that's the thing that did make it interesting. If this was not underwater, I would say it would have been pretty boring, pretty uneventful haunted house story, in my opinion. So I would say it is worth watching for the underwater element alone. There is some really beautiful cinematography, but there are some times where there are just a lot of bubbles, like when commotion happens and the people are moving around a lot underwater, it creates a lot of bubbles, and then it becomes kind of hard to see. So you get these really, really pretty set pieces in certain shots, and then other times you can't really tell what's going on. So yeah, I would say this one you can skip if you aren't super into haunted house movies. And even if you are, you might think that this is a little bit too boring and a little too cliche. But if you want to see it for the underwater elements, I would say go for it, because they are really beautiful. So I just gave this movie 3 stars, and the thing that bumped it up from 2.5 to 3 for me was the underwater cinematography. So this was one of the movies that I was watching for the Oscars. So I watched a lot of movies from 2021 in March to gear up for the Oscars, which my good friend Haunted Hippie puts on. If you notice a trend of a lot of recent movies, that's because I was watching them for the Oscars, which is kind of funny because I don't usually tend to seek out super new movies. So this was kind of a good challenge for me to watch newer horror movies, because I just kind of watch whatever comes to my mind. And a lot of times those are ones that came out at least 10 years ago, if not more. So it was kind of cool to be able to really delve into super recent releases. So I was grateful to have an excuse to watch a lot of newer movies. So thank you, Kylie, for that. So now we're going to move on to March watches. So the first movie that I watched in March was Diabolique, the remake from 1996. And this one is pretty faithful to the 1955 original movie. It does veer off towards the end. I'm not going to give anything away for those who haven't seen it, but this is one that I think if you did not know anything about the original, you would have a blast with this one. And I still had a lot of fun having seen the original, but I think if you just go in not knowing anything about the first one, it would be just so much fun to watch. But regardless of that, I still had a great time. I just loved watching Sharon Stone and Isabelle Adjani. I hope I'm saying her name right. I think I always struggle with that one, but I gave it 3.5 stars, and I said Sharon Stone and Isabelle Adjani can drown me in a bathtub any day. They play off each other really well in this. There's kind of a weird vibe. It might seem a little bit like a made-for-TV movie if you're watching it. The original is French, but it kind of seems like this one is sort of imitating a European movie while still being, in English and set in America. So it kind of has a little bit of a strange vibe to it, which I think is trying to imitate that sort of European feel. I could be wrong about that. That's just the vibe I got, but I kind of liked that. I thought it was a little bit offbeat. Yeah, it's just a little bit sleazier than the original. It's in color. All of the actors do just a great job, and I just really enjoyed it. So if you've been curious about this one, but you haven't watched it because you're like, oh, there's no way it's going to be as good as the original, it's not. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely not on the same level, but I would say as a standalone movie, it's pretty fun. Next up was a watch for the Oscars, but also one that I was very excited to watch in general, and that was The Night House from 2021. It says on Letterboxd 2020, but I think it wasn't released until 2021. But this one, I gave 4 stars, and I did really like it a lot. It's very popular. A lot of people really liked it. I thought that the story was really unique. I am getting just a little bit tired of grief being like a central point of a horror movie. Obviously, it's been done a lot, and for good reason. There are a lot of things that you can do with having someone grieving and then having horror stuff happen around that. I totally understand why it was done in this movie. It is like the driving force of the film. You know, this woman loses her husband to suicide and is grieving the loss of him while some supernatural stuff is happening around it, and there's this weird night house. So I think I'm getting a little bit tired of that kind of premise of a grieving woman. So maybe that kind of hampered my viewing of this just a little bit and why I didn't give it a higher rating. I did give it 4 stars because I do think it's really good. And Rebecca Hall's performance as our lead is just amazing. I mean, she just runs the gamut of emotions and really gives us an interesting depiction of grief in that she is very sardonic and sarcastic, and she's kind of trying to deal with it with humor, like a really dark kind of humor. And I think that's a really realistic depiction because it's not just her like weeping and sobbing all the time. She's really trying to just get back to normal life while grieving her husband. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed her performance. And the visuals of this movie are great. The special effects were great. Just fell a little bit flat story-wise. There were some things that I had questions on, which is why I didn't give it a full 5 stars, but still really, really enjoyed it. Definitely watch it if you haven't seen it yet. Next up is a movie that I'm so excited to talk about, and that is Fresh from 2022. And this is maybe my favorite release of the year so far. It is very closely tied with another movie that I will talk about later. But as far as debut feature films go, this was the director Mimi Cave's first feature film, and oh my god, she blew it out of the park.
What? I'm not familiar with that expression.
It's a James Bond.
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
I had so much fun with this movie. It's commenting on the dating culture of today. It's commenting on the way that we consume women's bodies in more ways than one. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but when you think about women being objectified, that is definitely something this movie is talking about. And the performances with our leads, Sebastian Stan and Daisy Edgar-Jones, just phenomenal. I mean, we set up with them kind of courting each other, and it's very cute, very sweet. I even remember saying, I posted on my Instagram story something like, I'm 30 minutes into Fresh and I know it's going to go bad soon, but this couple is just too cute and I'm really rooting for them, which was a great setup for what happens later in the film. The visuals of this movie as well, food is very much a part of the storyline, and the way that the food is shot just looks so good. And it really just mixed humor and horror and gross out moments together really well. It's not super gory or anything by any means, but just the subject matter is gross. It basically hit all the points that I want a horror movie to hit for me to really enjoy it. And I cannot recommend it enough. Everybody go run to Hulu and watch this movie right now. Get a free trial or something if you don't have a subscription, because it is totally worth seeing, and I am really looking forward to watching it again, just knowing everything that happens and watching it play out. But yeah, this one I gave 4.5 stars and a heart because I loved it so much. Next up is another slasher from 2005, Like Cry Wolf. This one is one that's a lot lesser known though, and it's Venom. I hadn't heard of this movie before. I think it was the podcast that I was talking about earlier. Colors of the Dark mentioned it, And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of that. I only know Venom, like the Marvel guy. So I was like, ooh, I'm really interested to see like an underrated early 2000s slasher. Like, let's go. And I want to say it was actually streaming for free, maybe on like IMDb TV or something like that. So streaming with ads. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. It's basically like a guy I think they're in Louisiana. They're in the bayou somewhere. And a guy gets bitten by these snakes that had voodoo done on them. So he was dying, but he came back to life as a superhuman, undead person. So, I hope that doesn't spoil it. It's not really a spoiler. That happens pretty early on in the movie, but the thing that I kind of have problems with in movies like this is the use of voodoo. I am not someone who practices voodoo, but I do know that it has been misrepresented in horror movies for a really long time. So I do get really wary about movies like this that utilize it as like a major plot point, and have it kind of like connected with evil in a way. I don't know. If you know anything about this subject, if you are, practice voodoo or you know about it, please let me know. If you've seen this movie too, if you found it problematic, because I don't know. I just think it's a very interesting thing that we're kind of looking back on and being like, maybe not the best representation of this thing that is a religion, you know. That aside, I did like the slasher elements. Of course, we've got some not too great early 2000s CGI, but it is mixed in with some pretty good practical effects. Again, not gonna blow your mind with originality plot-wise, but still enjoyable. I gave it 2.5 stars. I really liked the setting. I think the bayou was a really cool place to have it. I will say that I wish the final girl was a different person, but I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to spoil it. So yeah, this is one I think if you've got a night where you're not doing anything and you want to explore a lesser known early 2000s slasher, then go ahead and put this on. Next, I watched Alone from 2020. And this was another woman abducted type movie. I thought it was pretty good. There was some pretty tense moments throughout. It does take a little bit of time to build, but once you get through that, it's pretty suspenseful. I would say, again, this is one that's not super original story-wise. Pretty straightforward man abducts woman type story. So yeah, I would say, again, this is one you can skip it if you want to. If you're really curious about it, go for it. The acting was pretty good. The cinematography was good. Everything was very solid. Like, it was not a bad movie by any means. It's just after watching a movie like Fresh that has a really fresh take on this type of story, this one just felt pretty basic. So if you are curious about it, I'd say go for it and watch it. I'm definitely not mad that I watched it. It was good, but I gave it 3 stars because it was just a little bit over average for me. But, you know, not mad that I spent an hour and a half watching this movie. So next movie I want to talk about is Coming Home in the Dark from 2021. This is a New Zealand movie, and it really took me by surprise. I was not expecting it to turn out the way it did, although I didn't really go in with any expectations because I did not read anything about the plot. I didn't watch a trailer. I went in pretty blind. So it starts out with this family, mom and dad and their 2 sons, and they're going on a hiking trip. And it kind of reminded me of the scene in Zodiac on the beach. I haven't actually seen Zodiac. That's one I really, really need to watch. But I do know about the scene where there are these 2 people laying on the beach and the Zodiac killer just comes up and they have no idea why he's doing what he's doing. And that's kind of what happened at the beginning of this movie. This family is sitting down to eat lunch and these 2 guys come up with guns and they have no idea what's going on. And it kind of just escalates from there. So I was pleasantly surprised by the story. I do think that they maybe could have gone a little farther with it, maybe could have pushed it a little bit more to the extreme. And then the ending, I was just hoping for a little bit more of a climax. It was a little bit anticlimactic for me. So that aside, the acting was phenomenal. Everyone did an excellent job in the movie. I don't know any of the actors. I think they're all New Zealanders, and it kind of touched on the theme of like, what makes a person bad? Is it doing bad things, or is it failing to stop others from doing bad things? So I found that really, really interesting. So yeah, just overall, it's a really solid movie. I give it 3.5 stars just because I do wish they'd pushed it a little bit further, but it was definitely a nice little surprise. Next up is another film that I'm so excited to talk about, and that is X from 2022. And I gave this movie 4 stars and a heart. I'm looking back and I'm thinking maybe I should have bumped it up to 4.5 stars. When I left the theater, I just couldn't stop thinking about this movie. The whole day after I was thinking about it, and it's just one that really stuck with me. And it may have stuck with me a little bit more because I was able to see it with 2 very good friends of mine that I was able to meet in person for the first time. Ken Sledge and Ashley Sledge of Sledgehammer Horror. If you aren't already following them, please go subscribe to them right now because they're awesome. And we've been friends on Instagram and YouTube for quite a while, but this was the first time we were able to meet up and see each other in person. They were going to Horror Hound in Cincinnati, and I was able to meet up with them there. And I figured, if I can't go to the convention, let's go and see a movie so we can finally see each other and meet in person. And it was so much fun, such a blast. A little bit of a weird movie to watch with people you haven't actually met in person before, just because of, some of the elements that have to do with them shooting a but, that aside, I had a really, really good time. So I think that helped with the viewing of this film because I was already really excited, but I was really blown away. I think I might actually try to do an in-depth spoiler review of this movie because I liked it so much. If you would like to see that, please let me know in the comments, and I would be very open to doing a full review of this movie. I don't know if I'll be able to watch it again before I do that. I would really love to watch it a second time and kind of nail down more of the details, but I don't know if I'll be able to get back to the theater before I would do a review. I do know it is getting a physical media release in May, so I could wait until then, but I'm just really excited about it now. So please let me know in the comments if you want to see that. But it's set in 1979. We've got a group of people going out to an isolated farmhouse to shoot a porn movie, and some crazy slasher stuff ensues from there. I don't want to give anything away, of course. This movie is still very, very new. Speaking of New Zealand, this film was filmed in New Zealand, but it still gave me all the Texas vibes that I was wanting. We got some really amazing costuming from it being, late 70s, and the hair and makeup was all just great. Ty West, the director, just really knows how to do period pieces, and this one was no different. He did an excellent job having a really grindhouse 70s type of feel. We get some great performances from all the actors. It was so fun watching Brittany Snow in a horror movie again. She's kind of returned to horror since, I think, Would You Rather was the last one she was in. And of course, Jenna Ortega and Mia Goth are both amazing actresses. And Kid Cudi really held his own. I thought that his performance was really good too. And Ty West just really took his time setting up these characters. I think it would have been really easy for someone to be making a movie about people making a and having them be sort of downtrodden or, down on their luck, and this kind of being a last resort for them to make money. But he didn't choose to do that. He chose to have them be really upbeat and really hopeful and excited about what they were doing, which I thought was really refreshing. And it really made us care about the characters. In slasher movies, it's pretty common to get characters that we don't care about because we know they're going to die anyway. But this made it just all the more sad when we did see some of them go. And the practical effects were amazing. They did a great job with all of those. Yeah, just everything about this movie I really enjoyed. And looking back on it, I just like it more and more. So I can't wait to rewatch it again. If you are able to go to the theater to see it, I would highly suggest it. But if you don't mind waiting for it to come on physical media or streaming, then watch it as soon as you can, because this movie is it's something special. And I really had a great time with it. Next, I watched the Maniac remake from 2012, starring Elijah Wood. And although I will preface this by saying this movie was not my favorite in terms of movies in general, it's not really one that I think I'll be rewatching very often, but I do think that it is one of the best horror remakes I have ever seen. And by that, I mean, I think it paid perfect homage to Maniac from 1980. It took all of the stuff that made that movie what it was and made it a cult classic, and took it through a 2012 lens and made it into a modern style of that type of movie. If you've seen the original, you'll know it's kind of gritty and grimy, and it just has this sort of exploitation feel to it. And just the way that we interact with our lead, the antagonist, he's not good. We're not rooting for him, but Frank. And I thought that Elijah Wood did a great job playing him off and being a similar character, but also different in that he's Elijah Wood and not Joe Spinell. They're two very different people, just physically. So I don't know. I just thought they did a really fantastic job pulling it off. And the murder sequences were pretty brutal. The effects were really good. The camera work was really good. All of that was great. So really props to everybody who made that movie, because I think it is a perfect remake, honestly. I don't throw the word perfect around a lot, but I really do think that for what it was a perfect remake of Maniac. So I gave it 3.5 stars. That 1.5 stars off is literally just for personal taste. Other than that, I would say if we're just grading it on how good of a remake it is, I would give it 5 stars because it was just that good. So if you loved the original Maniac and you haven't seen this one yet, I would say absolutely watch this as soon as possible. Next up is another remake. I've been watching a lot of remakes because, speaking of Ken, I am going to be on his channel doing our top 10 favorite remakes. I think this video will be posted before that live happens, so if it is, then go ahead and tune into that live on Thursday, April 7th. I believe that's happening at 7 p.m. PST. Yeah, if this video is posted before April 7th, please tune in for that and watch me and Ken and Ashley. And I believe we're going to have another guest on there, not just horror. We're going to be counting down our top 10 favorite horror remakes. So I wanted to catch up on remakes because I'm a little bit behind. There are a lot that I haven't seen. So the next movie that I watched was the Suspiria remake from 2018. This one really blew me away too. I watched a lot of movies that I really enjoyed this month, so I gave this one 4 stars and a heart. I had heard that it was weird, so I was very prepared for a lot of weirdness, which, you know, that's on par with the first one. If you're going in wanting to see the same cinematography and the same lighting and color palette as the first one, then you will be disappointed because this movie has a very muted color palette. It is not the bright, you know, colorful lights and things like that, which I wasn't mad about. It was still amazing cinematography. So if you were looking for more aesthetics, then I would say this might disappoint you a little bit. But as far as the story and as far as really digging into the witch aspect and connecting it to events that are happening in 1970s Berlin at the time, all of that was so well done. And of course, Dakota Johnson as our lead absolutely kills it. The dance sequences were amazing. The like kind of interpretive modern dance style really fit in well with like the creepy magic of the witches, and the effects were amazing. The end just pops off like crazy. Yeah, I would say this is one that might be one of my favorite, if not my favorite horror remake, although you'll have to tune in to the live with Sledgehammer Horror to find out exactly what my number one favorite horror remake is. But this one is definitely up there. I'm so glad I finally watched this. It was a long time coming. It's a movie that took the DNA of the original and just cranked it up to 11, so absolutely loved the Suspiria remake. Next is another remake, and that is The Town That Dreaded Sundown from 2014. Again, this is another one that I really enjoyed and one that's been on my radar for quite a while. I tried to watch the original, years ago, and I got so bored that I turned it off. I did not finish it, but I honestly think this might be the first ever requel. It's not necessarily commenting on the events of the first movie, it's commenting on the movie itself. Kind of like, it reminds me of how the Stab movies are referencing the Scream killings. This movie is the reverse of that, if that makes sense. The original movie from the 70s was based on real events. So in this sequel, we are in the town where the events really did happen, and there was a movie made about it, which is now causing some copycat killers to come back and do this all over again because the town will not let the events go. Like, they keep watching the movie every year. It's always talked about these killings are basically something that defines the town. So I hope that all made sense. If that was a little confusing, I'm sorry. It's a little hard to describe, but I really enjoyed that kind of meta aspect of this movie. There are definitely some things where I'm like, it's not perfect. There are some scenes specifically where The lights are really, really blown out. Just whatever setting or filter we had on the camera was looking a little strange. But it gives me the Texas vibes, which I really enjoy. I really like our final girl. I thought she did a great job and was pretty likable. I'm not going to give away any killer identity, but I do like that they kept the look of the original killer with like the sackcloth mask and his like denim jacket thing. I really enjoyed that. And there were some good kills. So yeah, this is another one that I really, really enjoyed more than I thought I was going to. So if you're ever curious about this one, I would say absolutely watch it. And I will try to give the original another chance. I think maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset, or maybe it really is just that boring. But either way, that didn't affect my viewing of this at all. I still enjoyed it so much. I gave it 3.5 stars and a heart. Next up, I watched Last Night in Soho, of course, from last year. This is one that was really, really hyped up, and it basically lived up to most of the hype. I would say soundtrack amazing, costuming amazing, lighting, cinematography, editing, acting, all of that stuff was really, really great. No complaints there. I think the one thing that got me was the way the story played out and the ending. I'm not mad at it, but I think I need to rewatch it with that in mind. Because it did kind of throw me off the direction it went. So I hope that doesn't affect anybody's viewing of it. If you haven't seen it, just go into it with an open mind and know that you're going to have a good time no matter what, because yeah, it definitely deserves all the praise it's getting. Anything with Anya Taylor-Joy is probably going to be a win for me, but I thought that the other lead did a really good job as well. Thomasin McKenzie, I don't know if I've seen her in anything else, but yeah, she did a great job too. So I gave this movie 4 stars. It's really, really great. Definitely a good time. Just a little peek into the Oscars, you are going to see this movie nominated a lot because it was definitely a favorite amongst horror fans. So another one that I would definitely recommend watching. Next is another 2021 movie, and that is Titane. This one has been pretty controversial, and for good reason. It is very, very weird. Everything you've heard about it is true. It is a little bit outside of my comfort zone. Not really in terms of the body horror. I wasn't too shocked by that. It was more so the way the story went, which I'm not going to even try to explain it right here, but you can go and look up any descriptions if you want to know more about it. If you haven't heard about it, I'd be pretty surprised because so many people are posting about it. But the director, Julia Ducournau, sorry if I'm saying her name wrong, but she directed Raw from a few years ago, which I did like, another body horror movie. This one, I don't think I liked it as much as Raw. It was just a little bit more out there than that film. But, you know, if you're in for a weird time, if you just want to experience some crazy body horror, don't think about it. Just let the movie take you where it wants to go, because if you try to make sense of it, you're going to end up being confused, probably. But I do know a lot of people that really like this movie as well. So I'm not knocking it. I think it won the Palme d'Or. It's definitely pushing some boundaries. It's definitely saying some things about gender and gender identity and family. Those things were very interesting. It was just kind of the package it was delivered in that was a little bit off-putting for me. So for that reason, I gave it 3.5 stars. And in my Letterboxd review, I just said, it's doing something. I'm just not sure what. So I think that's kind of the perfect description of how I felt about this movie. Next is another 2021 movie and another remake, and that is the Slumber Party Massacre remake. I gotta say, I had a ton of fun with this movie. It's basically taking the premise of the original and kind of playing with the gender roles in slasher movies and certain tropes and things like that. I really did enjoy the humor. I think with a movie like this, it can go either way, and it can be a little cringy or a little cheesy. And I didn't feel that way about this, about the jokes that they were making in this movie. So that aspect I did really enjoy. I thought that the gore was pretty good. I think it was relatively low budget. You know, it was a sci-fi movie. So when you think of sci-fi movie, you think, okay, it's going to have some pretty bad effects and the story's not going to be great and the acting is going to be iffy too. So it was none of those things. All of those aspects were good, in my opinion. I think they paid a really good homage to the original. There were lots of fun little nods to it, which I really enjoyed. Just the fact that they had 2 characters named Guy Number 1 and Guy Number 2, like, very, very self-aware, definitely knew what it was trying to do, and I just appreciated that. So I gave it 3.5 stars and a heart. this is definitely one I could see myself going back to just to have a fun time. It's a pretty fast-paced movie. It goes by pretty quickly. It doesn't really waste any time, so I appreciate that as well. So if this is one that you've been a little bit iffy on, I would say go into it knowing that it's gonna be more of a satire and less of a straightforward slasher. And I think if you go in with that in mind, then you'll really enjoy it. And the last movie I watched in March was Hellbender from 2021. And I gotta say, this movie absolutely blew me away for it being a low-budget indie film, basically done by one family. They did pretty much every single creative aspect of this film, from the filming to the acting to the original music that was in the film. Which is just so impressive. I was so impressed by the special effects, the acting, the art direction, just the way the movie was shot. The story itself was relatively simple. It's basically a mother and daughter who are witches, and the daughter is discovering this fact about her family. And just that simple premise alone, they did so much with it. Some of the visual elements, like the witchy things they do with sticks and flowers and all those kinds of things, were so beautiful and so well executed. I cannot say enough that the music in the film slaps so hard because the mother and daughter are in a punk band together, so that's super cool. And I was really, really happy with the way it ended. Just everything about this movie, I was like, yes, I'm here for it. And I think we should really just be supporting indie creators in general. This movie really just goes to show that independent filmmakers are doing stuff that can rival A24 movies, and movies with way higher budgets and way more resources than this family has. It is streaming on Shudder. If you have Shudder, please go watch it. Do not be turned off by the fact that it's an independent movie because honestly, it's better than some of the bigger studio films I've seen. So please go watch Hellbender as soon as you can. All right, that's gonna do it, everybody. I know this was a long one. I'm kind of sorry, but I had to fit in those movies from February that I didn't talk about. So I really hope that everybody who stuck around enjoyed it. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And again, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and we'll talk horror next time.